All right, let's dive into something pretty mind-bending today. We're going to look at a sacred text, the Qur'an, in a way you've probably never seen it before. Not as a book you read from front to back, but as a living, dynamic field of information. This is going to be a fascinating journey. So let's start with a question that I'm sure has crossed the mind of anyone who's read the Qur'an. Does it repeat itself? You see the same stories, the same phrases, the same ideas popping up again and again. But what if that's not repetition? What if something much more complex is going on?
This is where we need to kind of shift our thinking. Let's move away from the idea of repetition, just simple copy-pasting, and embrace this concept of multiplicity. Think of it like ripples in a pond. When two waves meet, they don't just repeat each other, they interfere, creating bigger peaks and deeper troughs. They create a whole new complex pattern.
And that idea right there pushes us into a completely new paradigm. We're moving from a linear book, something static on a page, to a living, breathing field.
So, what if the Qur'an isn't just a list of stories and rules? What if it's one single continuous field of consciousness where every single part is connected to every other part, all at the same time?
To really get this, we've got to borrow a concept from quantum physics, the wave function. Now don't worry, it's simpler than it sounds. Imagine a cloud of all possibilities. That's the wave function. It holds all the potential information about something. And it's only when you look, when you observe it, or in our case, read it, that this cloud of possibilities collapses into one single, definite reality.
And this leads to the central idea, the core thesis of this whole model. The Qur'an doesn't repeat itself. It interferes with itself. The different parts of this wave are constantly interacting, amplifying some meanings, refining others, and creating this incredibly rich, textured pattern that we experience as the text.
Okay, but a field like this can't just be random chaos, right? It needs rules. It needs boundaries to give it shape. And this model argues that the Qur'an actually embeds its own rules right inside the text. Two specific verses act like the operating system, the boundary conditions that make this whole thing eternal and self-correcting.
And here's the first one. It comes from Surah 6, and it essentially says that if you just follow the majority, you're going to get lost, because most people are just following assumptions.
So what does that mean in the context of our model? Well, it means truth is not a popularity contest. An observation based on a hunch or a guess or what everyone else is doing, that's going to collapse the wave function into a false reality. Only an observation based on real, correct knowledge reveals the truth of the system.
All right, that's the first rule. The second one brings in the dimension of time. This verse talks about how a community's doubt in the past led them to make a definitive and wrong statement about the future.
This idea has a name in science. It's called hysteresis. It's basically the idea that a system has a memory. What it's doing right now isn't just a result of what's happening right now, it's deeply influenced by its entire past. Your choices stick around.
So you see what's happening? This verse creates a kind of time lock. The doubt and rejection from one moment don't just disappear. They actually crystallize, hardening into a blind spot that prevents you from seeing the truth the next time it shows up.
And when you put these two rules together, boom, you get something incredible. A self-selecting, self-cleaning system. Step 1, most people observe based on assumption, not knowledge. Step 2, that wrong observation literally makes it impossible for them to see the truth later on. The only people who can continue to perceive the field correctly are the ones who are aligned with knowledge from the start.
Okay, so we have this self-correcting field. What does that do to our understanding of the prophets and all the stories we read about? Well, this is where the model gets really powerful.
In this way of thinking, the prophets aren't really separate individuals with totally new messages. They are all manifestations of one single underlying prophetic state, the core message itself. The difference between them is what you'd call a phase shift. It's like looking at the same object, but just from a different angle. The object doesn't change, only your perspective. This table really helps visualize it. Look, you have one fundamental reality, one source, the one light. But when you observe it from angle A, it appears as Ibrahim. Look at it from angle B, you see Musa. From angle C, you see Isa. It's the same light, the same substance, just a different angle of observation.
Now, this model doesn't just change how we see the messengers, it completely flips our understanding of time itself, at least within the structure of the text.
We're all used to thinking of time as a straight line, right? Past, present, future, simple. But this model says, nope, that's not the shape of the Qur'an.
It's more like a Mobius strip. You know, that weird loop with a half twist in it? You can travel along its entire surface and you end up right back where you started, but upside down. And this is why what looks like a flat-out contradiction in a linear reading makes perfect sense here. This topological shape explains how a hard no, a limit in one part of the story, can become a yes, an opening, somewhere else down the line. It's all the same continuous surface.
And this connects to another really elegant idea from physics, the principle of least action. It basically says that nature is efficient. A river flowing down a mountain will always find the easiest path. The Qur'an talks all the time about the straight path. Well, in this model, that's the path of least action, the most efficient, direct route through the moral landscape.
Okay, let's pull all these threads together now. When we put on these wavefunction glasses, everything that might have seemed repetitive or confusing suddenly locks into this beautiful, coherent system.
So, let's just quickly recap the architecture of this thing. We start with one single wave function of consciousness. It's defined by two boundary conditions that make it a closed, self-selecting system. The prophets we see are just phase shifts of one state. Time itself is shaped like a Mobius strip. And the right way to navigate it all is the straight path, the principle of least action. And this is the punchline. The system is eternal because it's built to be. It doesn't need anyone to protect it from the outside, because it protects itself. Anyone who tries to observe it with the wrong tools, with assumption, with doubt, simply loses the signal. They decohere, fading into static, leaving the original wave perfectly intact.
So that leaves us with one last big question to chew on. If a book isn't just a book, but a field, and its verses aren't just words, but interference patterns, what does that do to the act of reading? What are we really doing when we open its pages?